107.5 WGCI, the shot's #1 for hip-hop and R&B. It's the morning show with the Destin legend, Leon Rogers, the beautiful Kendra G, the shortest damn man in Chicago, myself, Kyle. We have a very special guest in the studio this morning, man, and it's an honor to have her here today. The first black lieutenant governor, Miss Juliana Stratton.
Yes! Good morning. Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You got that black girl magic happening. She got the edges slicked back. I'm just really
Came in
excited
dancing to Beyonce.
Well, I knew I was coming here, so I put a little edge control. Just to make sure.
I love it.
It's a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, honestly.
So congratulations on the position.
Thank you.
And congratulations on being the first black lieutenant governor. What does that mean to you? The fact that we're in 2019 and we still have first black whatever. You
That's
know what I
right.
mean? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think from a couple of different levels. When I was at our inauguration, I talked about the history of my family coming from Stevensville, Mississippi, and what it meant to be the descendants of slaves and now be, or people who were enslaved, and now to be in the position of being lieutenant governor 200 years into the state of Illinois' history. Mm-hmm. So when I thought about that, it was an awesome moment. And what I think about it is that this is an opportunity to be at the tables where decisions are being made and to specifically bring my lived experience as a black woman to the table and to talk about what has been most important to our communities. When I ran and was asked to be the governor's running mate, I told him, look, I have a lot of things that I'm passionate about. I don't want to kind of be sitting on the side. I want to be very engaged. I want some substantive work because there's a lot to do in our communities which have been ignored for far too long. And he said to me, that's exactly what I want. And so we started our partnership there during the campaign. We continue in partnership now. And I just look forward to continuing to be a voice and lifting up the voices of communities that for far too long have been ignored.
And for those who don't know, if anything was to happen to the governor, you would become the governor of Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the president and the vice president.
Right.
And I take that role very seriously, that if for whatever reason he could not carry out his responsibilities, then I would step into that role. But there's other roles that I have. Both statutorily, I lead the Governor's Rural Affairs Council. And even though I'm from Chicago, I've learned a lot about the issues in rural communities that are very similar to the ones that we have in urban communities: food insecurity, lack of affordable housing, access to technology and broadband, which there's still people who don't have access to internet and broadband in our state. So that's something I'm really learning about, and I really love learning about these rural affairs. I'm also the newly named chair of the Illinois Council on Women and Girls, and the governor signed very early in our administration a new executive order establishing the Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative, which means that, and it's housed in my office and under my leadership, and we bring an equity lens to policy making that has never before been seen in our state. So when we think about justice, we have to move beyond just jails, policing, and prisons. We have to talk about lack of access to affordable housing. We have to talk about lack of access to health care, what's happening in our education system, what's happening with unemployment that disproportionately affects our communities. So I'm really proud to be doing that work.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier when you told the governor, now Governor Mr. Pritzker, that you have a lot of passion about a lot of things that you want to put on the table. When saying that to him, because I know sometimes politicians who may not be in tune will grab somebody that's in tune to get the people that's in tune with them to vote with them. How much of it, when you being passionate about it, do you really want to get them to see what you're talking about, not just use you for what you bring to a figurehead? How much work do you have to do to get them to really see what you're talking about when you talk about things that you're passionate about?
Well, I think the way that I've approached this role, so I was a state representative before coming into the role of lieutenant governor. And the first thing that the governor did, at the time he was JB, now he's Governor Pritzker. The first thing that he did when he was even looking for somebody to run with, I didn't even know this, is he came to my community. So I live in Bronzeville, and I always appreciated that he came to Bronzeville to sit down with me at one of our local restaurants and said, tell me about your community, tell me about your district. So I am always seeking to be authentically me. Like, I'm who I am. I talk about my lived experience as a black woman who grew up on the south side of Chicago, who went to Kenwood Academy and then the University of Illinois and then to DePaul Law School. I talk about when he and I talk, it is from my lived experience. And I'm hoping that as he experiences me and others, that he is understanding what my experience is and why I look at issues the way that I do and policy the way that I do. But I think that the other thing that I'm looking for is to make sure that as people are as we're learning about each other, that when he hears me talk about some of these issues, such as the adult use of cannabis and our legalization of adult use of cannabis, you will see that it's the governor who made sure that the messaging was, it's not just about revenue, it is about equity. That's not something that is just from me. I'm talking about it, but he is too. And that was one of the considerations I had in joining him in this partnership, was that, where is he coming from about these issues? And I can tell you that he believes that equity should be at the forefront, and that's why he's tasked me with that role.
You brought up the legalization of
weed,
marijuana,
trying to make weed legal.
Right. And the governor announced that bill. So what does that mean for the everyday person? What does that mean for, just a guy that's walking down the street? He's not out here trying to sell weed or any of that, but he might have a little in his pocket for after the game. What does that mean for that person?
What it means is that in our community, in Black and brown communities all across not just the city and state, but across the country, a guy who had a little bit in his pocket or wants a little bit in his pocket, if they were from our community, they would end up probably being arrested, detained, and be on that path in the justice system. And what this means for us is that we would bring equity and justice, which means that, first of all, we need to expunge the records of those who have been caught up in the system.
The people that are in jail, they will be able to be out of jail?
Well, what it means is that as we're looking going forward, people who have low level offenses or have convictions for low level offenses can get those records expunged and those arrests expunged.
But if they're in jail now, are they able to get out?
Because of a weed charge.
Right. So, being that the laws may change.
Right. So what the law is focused on is right now, if you have your record, if you have a record, an arrest record, if you've been convicted, then you can get that expunged from your record.
Okay.
And what it also means is that for the guy that you've mentioned, is that person would not, who just had something in their pocket, they're not going to get arrested.
Right.
So that's big for our communities.
Right.
But I want to make sure that we don't lose this, because a lot of people talk about, what does it mean for possession or use or whatever?
Right.
What it really also means is that people, as we think about the legalization of adult use of cannabis, that we have an equity lens around who has access to this industry. People who need their records expunged so they can work and own, but also that we have access to capital to people so they can start businesses. This is going to be such a multi-billion-dollar industry. Already is in many ways. Yeah. And we too often get boxed out of these industries. So the governor and I are being very specific. By the way, I should say, this legislation has been worked on for years. This is not new. People have been working on it. I think it's the right time to get it done. Most people in our state want to see it happen. If you haven't called your legislators, call them and let them know you want to see the legalization of adult use of cannabis with an equity lens at the forefront. Because that's more important than any revenue we bring in, is that we have justice and equity through this legislation.
I like it.
I like it too. I know we got to go, but I mean, the way the life works, I got to bring it up. So just education in Chicago real quick, because it's so crazy. We had Chance the Rapper and you the same day. I remember when Chance met with the previous governor and things didn't go too well. What does this governor stand when it comes to the education in the cities of Chicago?
When we proposed a balanced budget this year for our fiscal year 2020, we included increases to education at every level, starting with early childhood education, because we know that we have to start early. You don't start preparing young people in high school, you start them at the very youngest ages. We have more funding for K through 12 education. We have more funding for our institutions of higher education, including MAP grants, the monetary award programs for students of color primarily, as well as students from low-income families, so that they can have a pipeline to higher education. But I also want to say we included increased funding for career and technical education, or what some people know as vocational training.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of young people where college is not their path. But that doesn't mean they should be cut off from pathways to opportunity and great jobs as well. So every level we've proposed increase to funding, and we hope to see that budget passed because education has to be a priority. It's what we ran on, and it's what we're intending to do.
Well, I like it.
You know what, Lieutenant Governor, before you get out of here, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for creating the position of cannabis testing leader, and I will be taking this position. I accept, and I want to move forward into 2020, advancing the technology of testing this cannabis so that when it does reach our communities and people,
it's safe.
It is safe and it is FDA approved. I appreciate you. I'm actually going to work first year pro bono. And it's all because of you putting me in this position. I accept.
Yes.
I accept.
You accept.
That's exclusive right
I
on
didn't
the
know
money.
about this, but
I don't want to tell anybody. We talk. I mean, you know, your people. It didn't get up.
It was my people. It didn't get to me.
Because there's bad weed and good weed. You gonna need him to test the weed. You don't want no bad weed.
We don't want people getting huffed.
Yeah.
We want everybody to have good stuff.
For lack of better words, it's in the pipeline.
Safety is a concern.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we considered that, but thank you for raising safety is a concern. Thank you all.
I accept. Once again, I accept.
Chicago Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all for having me.
We look forward to you doing what you do.
Leave me that edge control, girl. Leave me that edge control. What is the brand? It's some slick back.
GCI.